if he looks at you here, he dreamed about you last night. Carl Jung reveals the 7 signs of unconscious attraction that no one has ever explained to you like this. What you're about to hear isn't some romantic theory. It's the exact psychological blueprint of what happens in a man's mind when your dignity becomes stronger than your love for him. And when that happens, nothing stays the same. Not for either of you. This video exists to show you the precise mechanism, the inner shift that gets triggered when he realizes he can no longer have you at any cost. This isn't content designed to comfort you or inflate your self-esteem. It's a deep reflection on how the male psyche reorganizes itself when faced with a woman who won't negotiate her center. If you leave before the end, you'll miss the most crucial part, the part that separates the woman who gives in again from the woman who will never be taken for granted again. And Carl Jung warned that no one confronts another human being without first confronting their own shadow. And that's exactly what happens here. Your dignity forces him to see what he'd been avoiding. If any of this is already landing for you, subscribe and write in the comments what you're feeling. That way, YouTube understands that this reflection deserves to go further, because if you hear it at the right moment, it won't just change your mood, it'll change the inner structure from which you love. First sign. The moment he realizes you're no longer negotiable. Listen carefully, because this shatters a very common illusion. A man doesn't realize he's losing you when you physically leave. He realizes it when he can no longer move you internally. It's not a sentence spoken in anger. It's not a boundary announced in a difficult conversation. It's not an emotional scene where you cry and say you can't anymore. It's a silent shift in your inner position, and when it happens, he senses it long before he can put it into words. Let me make this concrete with a real case that repeats more often than you'd imagine. A woman I'll call Chrisbel came to a consultation with a story I know well. She was affectionate, deep, committed. She didn't beg, didn't chase, didn't make scenes. From the outside, anyone would have said she had dignity. But internally, she was negotiating in silence, justifying his absences, waiting too long, tolerating small inconsistencies so she wouldn't be inconvenient, until something changed, not on the outside but within. For years, Chrisbel confused patience with mature love. She thought understanding meant giving in, that adapting meant caring, and without realizing it, she taught her inner system and his that her space could stretch without breaking. Every long wait, every lukewarm response, every accumulated "it's fine" formed a silent dynamic. There was no malice, but there was no growth either. Because when you adapt too much, the other person never feels the urgency to get themselves in order. And this is felt even when it's not said. The break didn't come with a slammed door or tears. It came the day Chrisbel stopped over-explaining herself. Something didn't sit right with her, and she no longer justified it. Something irritated her, and she no longer swallowed it. She didn't leave. She didn't threaten. She didn't complain. She simply stopped betraying herself in the small things. This gesture, as invisible as it was radical, reconfigures everything. Because when you return to yourself, your energy stops asking, stops adapting so the other person won't leave. And this is felt like an immediate loss of access. Here appears the first male mental reaction. It's not fear yet. It's discomfort. He doesn't understand what's changed. He only feels that something isn't responding the same way anymore. Your silence weighs differently. Your boundaries don't sound defensive. Your presence no longer offers itself like before. And this forces him to observe, not to take care of you, but to reposition himself. Because when a woman stops being negotiable without announcing it, the man faces a new sensation. The dynamic he took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Jung would say that at this point, the shadow activates. That part of the psyche that reacts when it loses emotional control, not dominance, access. He doesn't think, I'll lose her. He thinks something deeper. I don't understand anymore from what position to relate to her. Before, when Chrisbel left, he lost a woman. Now when she leaves, he loses a comfortable inner position. And this is more unsettling than physical absence. Because love can be replaced. Embodied dignity? No. It's important that you see this clearly. This doesn't happen when you leave. It happens when you make 3 internal moves. You stop staying where your body tenses to maintain the relationship. You stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't willing to listen. You start making small decisions that align with you, even if the other person doesn't like them. Not to provoke, but to respect yourself. And when you do this, you don't become cold. You become clear. And clarity is deeply intimidating to someone who is comfortable in your emotional ambiguity. The man starts measuring, observing timing, words, reactions. Not because you're manipulating him, but because you've stopped manipulating yourself so he'll stay. Here, his fantasy breaks. She's always there. And when that certainty falls, his mind goes on alert. It's not love yet, it's recalibration, because no one appreciates what seems unconditional. But they do appreciate what has silent boundaries. I think this is the real beginning of psychological respect. Many women believe dignity is hardness. No, her dignity is inner consistency maintained over time. Chrisbel didn't become distant. She became whole. And this activated a dangerous question in him. What place do I occupy now? You're no longer a reaction. You're a presence. You no longer chase. You choose. And this constant choosing, without words, disarms every dynamic based on comfort. And there's no punishment here. There's structure. And structure orders more than any declaration of love. This step is silent but irreversible. Because once your system learns it doesn't have to strain to love, it can't go back. He feels it even if he doesn't name it. He knows something has changed, that he can no longer count on your emotional flexibility, and this forces him to define himself. Grow or withdraw, both options arise from the same point. You return to yourself, not from an external threat, but from an inner integrity that's no longer negotiable. I want you to hold this phrase as an anchor because it changes the entire board. I don't have to leave to stop being negotiable. I have to return to myself. When you integrate this, the bond stops being held together by inertia, and the male mind, losing comfort, begins to compare. Not you with the past, but with any other woman who doesn't embody this level of coherence. And there something even deeper begins. Second sign, why your dignity activates more respect than all the love you've given combined. It hurts, but it frees. Love without structure becomes scenery. It's there. It sustains, but it doesn't order. What truly reorganizes a man's mind is the inner form from which you love. When you love without abandoning yourself, when you don't shrink to fit, he can no longer read you from comfort. And this silent, firm shift weighs more than any emotional promise you made before. The common mistake is believing that giving more love generates more commitment. No, it generates more habit. Dignity, however, introduces a new variable, consequence, not punishment, not coldness, consistency. Jung explained that the psyche respects what has contour. When you have clear internal boundaries, the other person perceives that something exists they can't cross without transforming themselves. And this awakens respect even before desire. Because now he doesn't possess you emotionally. He has to position himself before you. Here an unconscious comparison happens. He starts contrasting. He doesn't verbalize it, but he feels it. Your current presence against the past version that always adapted. Your calm against your old waiting. And this comparison generates internal tension. Because before your love was guaranteed, now your access isn't. And when access stops being certain, the male mind enters an evaluation that's not romantic. It's strategic. Do I rise or lose this place? This question marks a before and after. Many women think this is manipulation. No, it's not. Manipulating would mean changing to provoke a reaction. Here, you're not changing for him. You're changing for consistency with yourself. And this is felt differently. Your energy no longer pushes. Doesn't ask, doesn't adapt. It is. And this stable presence without effort disarms more than any speech, because he can no longer lean on your emotional flexibility to stay the same. Now he has to grow or feel uncomfortable until he leaves. In consultation, this point appears in their confused phrases. I don't know what's happening to me. I perceive her differently. Before it was simpler. Simple isn't love. It's access without consequences. And when this is lost, something new appears. Real attention. Not always healthy, not always mature. But finally, attention, because your dignity has forced his system to wake up. Not from fear of losing you physically, but from the feeling of losing an inner place that gave him security without effort. This is where many doubt and step back. When he starts approaching differently, measuring, being more attentive, the temptation to give in again appears. And there, everything is decided. Because if you use your dignity as a strategy, it dilutes. But if you maintain it as identity, it solidifies. Jung would say this is the moment when the bond stops being projection and becomes conscious choice, and not everyone is ready to choose from there. Your dignity doesn't guarantee he'll stay. It guarantees something more important, that you won't lose yourself. And paradoxically, that's what has the most impact. Because you no longer move from fear of losing him. You move from respect for your inner axis. And this emotional autonomy changes the balance. He's no longer the evaluator. Now he's the one who has to figure out if he can rise to the coherence you embody without announcing it. This respect isn't born from sacrifice. It's born from boundaries. Not from drama, but from maintained calm. When you don't react from the wound, but from clarity, he can no longer play at the same level as before. And this makes things uncomfortable, but it also awakens. Because dignity doesn't seduce like attachment does, but it leaves a trace that doesn't erase easily, not even when the relationship ends. You become the inner reference, not the romantic memory. I want you to see this without idealizing. Some men grow in the face of this. Others withdraw. Both results are coherent. What changes is that you no longer negotiate your center to hold on to someone. And when your love arises from there, it stops being a constant offer. It becomes shared choice. This is the difference between being desired and being respected. And the male mind, even if it doesn't admit it, always knows when it's facing the latter. Third sign, when respect begins to transform into silent fear, it's not the childish fear of losing you, it's the adult fear of not being good enough. Here the male mind enters contradiction. He wants to get closer, but fears exposing himself. He seeks you and then withdraws, not because he's playing games, but because his identity is reorganizing. Your dignity forces him to look at himself without the cushion of your availability. And this activates an inner anxiety, even if externally he shows calm or distance. This fear doesn't express itself with clear words. It appears as ambiguity, lukewarm messages, intense gestures. He tests if you're still there, but not from the same place. And when he realizes you don't react like before, that you don't chase or complain, the restlessness grows, because now he can no longer regulate himself through your emotional reaction. Jung would call this a collision with the true self, without masks, and not everyone knows how to bear that inner gaze. Many women misread this moment. They confuse intensity with progress. They believe intermittent closeness is a sign of emerging love. It's not always so. Sometimes it's just a system trying to regain control. Your job isn't to decode it, but to stay firm. If you don't move from fear, if you don't fill the voids, he faces something new, his own void. And this encounter can transform him or push him to flee. The important thing is this. Listen calmly. Your dignity doesn't accelerate processes, it reveals them. If he approaches from presence, you'll feel it. If he approaches from fear, you'll feel that too. The difference lies in stability. Love born from fear needs constant proof. Love born from respect seeks connection. And you, by not abandoning your center, become the natural filter that distinguishes one from the other without saying a single word. At this point, the dynamic has already begun to reverse. Before, you were the one measuring timing, words, gestures. Now it's him. He observes if you're still available, if something loosens, if you go back to adapting, and when you don't, an uncomfortable but revealing feeling appears. He no longer has you secured, not because you're leaving, but because you're no longer dependent. It's this emotional independence that reorganizes more than anything his perception of value. Jung stated that authentic desire arises when the other cannot be possessed. Only found. Your dignity removes you from the place of emotional object and restores you to that of subject. And this changes the gaze. You're no longer the one who's always there. You're the one who chooses to be there. This difference seems subtle, but it completely transforms the experience of the bond, because now he no longer relates to your dedication, but to your conscious presence. This is a delicate phase for you too, because if he shows fear or confusion, it can reawaken your old role, reassure, explain, support. Here it's decided whether your dignity is identity or strategy. If you give energy back to the bond, the system returns to the known. If you maintain yourself, something new installs itself. Not from coldness, but from inner coherence. And this coherence begins to require from him a clearer position. Some men at this point rise up. They become more present, more emotionally responsible. Others weaken, not because you did something wrong, but because the bar has been raised. And dignity doesn't negotiate downward. You don't push, don't threaten. You simply don't descend. And this redefines the bond without confrontation. Because true respect isn't imposed. It's embodied. And when it's embodied, it can no longer be ignored. I want you to observe something important. When he starts to change, it's not because you convinced him. It's because your integrity put him face to face with himself. And when he doesn't change, it's not a failure. It's information. Your dignity saves you years of confusion. It shows you who can meet you at the level you're at, and who could only love you when you made yourself smaller. This clarity hurts at first, but it liberates in the long term. Fourth sign, the moment he realizes there's no going back. The version of you that waited, that adapted, that gave in just to maintain things, she's not coming back. And this certainty doesn't arrive with a conversation. It arrives with an irreversible inner feeling. He can no longer provoke the same reaction in you. He can no longer count on your emotional availability. Something is closed, not from resentment, but from coherence. And when this happens, his mind stops testing and begins to decide from a deeper place. Here appears a silent mourning. He's not crying over your physical absence. He's mourning the loss of a dynamic that gave him security without effort. And this hurts more than you'd imagine, because confronting a woman who doesn't back down forces him to accept his own limits. Jung defined this point as the death of a projection. You no longer carry his voids. And when the projection falls, only two paths remain: mature or withdraw emotionally. If he decides to stay, the way he looks at you changes, no longer from comfort, but from conscious respect. He begins to regulate himself, to take emotional responsibility, to measure what he offers, not from fear of losing you, but because he understands he can't keep you from the same level. Your dignity has raised the standard without requiring it, and this movement redefines the bond. You're no longer refuge, you're encounter. and not everyone knows how to love from there. If he decides to go, even the closure is different. There's no persistent drama, no eternal push and pull. There's a clear sense of inner boundary. You don't chase explanations. Don't try to convince. And this leaves a trace, because even if he leaves, he carries with him an impossible to erase reference, that of a woman who didn't negotiate her access for love. This image returns later when other dynamics no longer suffice. This point is decisive for you, because here usually appears the doubt. Was I too rigid? You were coherent, and coherence is never excess. Love that survives only if you shrink isn't love. It's dependence. Your dignity hasn't destroyed anything precious. It only revealed what couldn't sustain itself at your level, and though it hurts to let go, something in you begins to rest. There's no more constant tension, no silent self-abandonment. Jung would say that here begins your true individuation. You no longer define yourself from being chosen, but from choosing yourself, and this identity transforms all your future bonds. Because now you don't love from lack, you love from presence. You don't try to be enough. You already are, and this energy changes how others approach, not from request, but from recognition. Your dignity becomes the natural filter. This step marks the definitive before and after. It doesn't matter if he comes back or not. You don't go back to the version that waited for crumbs. And this is the real gain. Because now you know you don't need intensity to feel valuable, nor promises to stay. Your calm becomes home. And from there can enter only those who know how to inhabit it without trying to disturb it to feel superior. Many men remember this type of woman not with romantic nostalgia, but with belated respect. Because she was the one who showed them the boundary they couldn't cross. And that boundary, far from shutting them out, put them face to face with themselves. You didn't teach with discourse, you taught with embodiment. And that's what remains when everything else dissolves with time. I want you to breathe here, because this isn't a point of hardness. It's a point of calm. You no longer have to sustain the unsustainable. You no longer have to translate yourself to be loved. Your dignity hasn't isolated you. It's ordered you, and when you're ordered within, the outside begins to respond differently. Not always quickly, not always simply, but always more authentically. Fifth sign, when you integrate dignity as identity, not as a response to a wound. Here you no longer act from the past, you act from presence. Your decisions don't seek an effect, they seek coherence. And this shows, your yes has weight, your no rests. There's no urgency to define something, because you're already defined from within. This stability changes how others read you, because there are no more emotional cracks through which to enter to negotiate your value. At this point, love stops being a continuous test. You no longer need signals to feel secure. Your body is aligned with your boundaries, your word with your actions. And this congruence, so simple and so rare, becomes magnetic, not through seduction, but through clarity. Whoever approaches perceives it, and whoever can't sustain it withdraws without noise. Dignity doesn't argue. It orders the field. Here something subtle happens. You begin to notice you no longer hook into vague promises or intensity without direction. Your system recognizes the difference between presence and performance. This saves you time, energy, illusions. You don't become demanding. You become precise, and emotional precision is a language understood only by those ready to connect without games. The rest falls away by itself without collision. Jung spoke of integration as the act of stopping fragmenting yourself to please others. That's what you're doing here. You no longer separate what you feel from what you allow. You don't negotiate your intuition to maintain a bond. And when someone tries to cross a boundary, your body reacts before your words. There's no anger. There's an elegant withdrawal. And this withdrawal, far from closing the heart, protects it. This is the point where many say, I no longer attract the same type of people. Exactly. Because you no longer transmit from lack. Your dignity changes the frequency. You no longer call in those who need to be held, but those who know how to hold themselves. And this doesn't guarantee quantity. It guarantees quality. Less noise, more truth, less fear, more choice. Your love life doesn't simplify because you love less, but because you love yourself better. Here the memory of him loses force. Not because he wasn't important, but because he no longer occupies the center. The center is you, and from there the past orders itself without resentment. You're grateful for what you learned, and you move forward. There are no open accounts, there are inner closures. This is true liberation, not when the other returns or asks forgiveness, but when you no longer need him to be at peace. This change is also noticed in silence. You no longer explain your boundaries. Don't justify your decisions. You simply act in coherence. And this coherence becomes your new normal. Whoever arrives late perceives it. There's no reproach. There's natural distance. Dignity doesn't build walls. It establishes thresholds. And only those who know how to cross them without invading enter. When you look back, you understand something important. You didn't lose love. You gained inner structure. And this structure is the foundation of every healthy bond. Without it, love overflows and wounds. With it, love contains itself and grows. Jung would say that here the bond stops being compensation and becomes a true encounter. Two emotionally adult people who choose each other, not who need each other. And this is the legacy of your dignity. Not changing anyone, but moving yourself to another place, leaving the role of the constant option and inhabiting that of conscious choice. And from there, everything reorganizes. Your relationships, your energy, your decisions. You no longer chase. You attract presence. You no longer fear losing. You trust in your capacity to choose better. And now, at the closing of this cycle, remember it, because it contains everything that precedes it. Sixth sign, when everything reconfigures from within, you no longer act by reaction. You act by identity. This is the point where dignity stops being a concept and becomes your natural way of being in the world. You don't ask yourself what to do so the other stays. You ask yourself if that bond honors who you are now, and this silent question guides every decision. There's no urgency, no fear. There's a firm calm that's no longer negotiable. And here something profound happens. Your nervous system learns that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with connection, nor sacrifice with commitment. Your body recognizes when something is healthy and when it's not. And this inner intelligence saves infinite explanations. You don't have to close cycles with words. You close them with coherence. And that coherence is felt even in your silence, even when you say nothing. Many men don't forget a woman like this. Not because she was perfect, but because she was whole. Because she didn't betray herself to be chosen. Because she showed without speaking what someone who respects themselves looks like. Jung said that what isn't integrated gets repeated, and you've broken the repetition. So you've become an inner reference point for those who've known you. Not everyone recognizes it immediately, but everyone remembers it. This is the point where love stops being a psychological game. There are no more tests, strategies, roles to maintain. There's presence, there's reciprocal choice, and if there isn't, there's still peace, because your value no longer depends on being desired, but on being faithful to yourself. This inner faithfulness is the foundation of every bond worth living. Without it, everything gets negotiated. With it, everything orders itself. I want you to hear this gently. Not everyone can love you from this level, and that's not a loss. It's a natural purification. Your dignity doesn't exclude. It filters. It lets in those who can sustain a relationship without depending on your self-sacrifice. And even if the path becomes more selective, it also becomes lighter. Less noise, less confusion, more truth. And when you integrate all this, you no longer look back with guilt, but with understanding. You understand why you gave in, why you waited, why you adapted, and you also understand why you can't anymore. Not because you're hard, but because you've grown. And growing means letting go of old versions of yourself. This too is self-worth, one that doesn't have to prove itself, only sustain itself. And Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the most courageous act of the human being, becoming what you truly are, even if it means losing bonds that existed only through dependence. You've walked this path, and so you've changed the way you love, choose, and let yourself be chosen. You no longer seek to complete yourself. You share from your wholeness. This is love that doesn't consume itself. Seventh sign, the final sign that completes the journey. When your dignity becomes the lighthouse that orients everything, it's not a barrier, it's a light. It doesn't chase love away, it orients it. And whoever comes toward you from now on will come knowing they can't take you for granted, but they can find you through choice. This is the difference between a bond that consumes and one that sustains. Today you don't leave with techniques, but with an embodied truth. You don't have to prove your value, nor convince someone to stay. Your simple, aligned, and firm presence already says everything. As a final reminder, integrate it into a phrase that will accompany you from now on, because it defines your new place in the world. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love. This phrase contains everything. Your dignity, your structure, your choice, and your unshakable power. If this message reached you today, stay a moment and leave a like. Subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments which part touched you most during this reflection. When we share from truth, YouTube favors this content, and these types of teachings reach only those who are truly ready to hear them. If you want to carry all this with you, not just as a momentary emotion, but as an inner structure that stays with you over time, the book, The Art of Detachment, is there in the description. It's the way to continue this journey when the video ends. Small gestures like a like, a comment, a subscription help grow this space together. Today, when you close the video, remember one thing. Your dignity isn't a barrier that pushes away. It's a lighthouse that orients toward the right one. It doesn't chase love away. It purifies it. and whoever comes toward you from now on will come knowing they can't take you for granted, but they can find you through real choice. This is the true difference between a bond that consumes everything and one that sustains forever. Thank you for listening to the end. This is your true beginning.